Imagine a man who was so brilliant that he laid the foundations for the computer age before the technology even existed to build one. A man who cracked the most complex code in human history and helped save millions of lives during the darkest days of the Second World War. A man who was then rewarded not with praise or honor, but with persecution, humiliation, and a chemical castration that would ultimately drive him to suicide. This is the story of Alan Turing, a man whose name has become synonymous with genius, tragedy, and the terrible price of being different. But here is what most people do not realize about Alan Turing. He was not just a mathematician or a codebreaker. He was a man who saw the future with a clarity that was almost painful. A man who conceived of machines that could think, machines that could learn, machines that could surpass their human creators. He was a man who lived in a world that was not ready for him, a world that could not accept his brilliance or his sexuality, a world that punished him for being exactly who he was. He was not just a victim, he was a visionary, a man whose ideas would revolutionize the world and whose story would become a powerful symbol of the fight for acceptance and equality. To understand Alan Turing, you have to go back to the beginning, to the bustling streets of London, where he was born on June 23, 1912, into a world of privilege and expectation. His father, Julius Matheson Turing, was a member of the Indian Civil Service, a man who spent much of his career in the British Raj, leaving his family behind in England. His mother, Ethel Sarah Stoney, was the daughter of a railway engineer, a woman of intelligence and refinement who struggled to raise her children in a world that was often distant and cold. Alan was the second of two boys, a quiet, introverted child who was different from other children from a very young age. He was a dreamer, a boy who was often lost in his own thoughts, a boy who was more interested in the patterns of nature and the mysteries of science than in the rough and tumble of schoolyard games. He was a boy who was deeply curious about the world, a boy who was determined to understand how things worked. Turing was sent to Sherborne School, a prestigious boarding school in Dorset, where he was a miserable student. He was not a good fit for the rigid, classics-oriented curriculum, and he was often bullied by his classmates. He was a boy who was different, a boy who was more interested in science and mathematics than in Latin and Greek. He was a boy who was not interested in sports, a boy who was not interested in conforming. He was a boy who was often isolated, a boy who felt like an outsider. He found solace in his studies, particularly in mathematics, a subject that gave him a sense of order and predictability. He was a boy who was developing a unique mind, a mind that could see patterns and connections that others could not. He would later recall that he had learned to be an atheist at the age of 15, a decision that reflected his growing belief in the power of reason and his rejection of traditional authority. He was a boy who was beginning to forge his own path, a boy who was determined to make his own way in the world. The turning point in his early life came when he was accepted to King's College, Cambridge, where he studied mathematics. It was a revelation. He was finally in a place where his intelligence was recognized and celebrated. He was no longer an outsider. He was a member of an elite community of scholars. He excelled in his studies, and he was elected a Fellow of the college in 1935, at the age of just 22. It was a remarkable achievement, a sign of his immense talent. He began to develop his ideas on computability, a field of logic that was then in its infancy. He was fascinated by the question of what it meant for a mathematical problem to be decidable. He was drawn to the work of the German mathematician Hilbert, who had posed the decision problem, or Entscheidungsproblem. In 1936, he published a paper on computable numbers with an application to the Entscheidungsproblem that would revolutionize the field. In the paper,
he introduced the concept of a universal machine, a theoretical device that could be programmed to perform any conceivable calculation. It was a radical idea, a vision of a machine that could simulate any other machine, a machine that could think. The concept of the Turing machine became the cornerstone of computer science.
Despite his groundbreaking work, Turing remained a somewhat eccentric and isolated figure. He was a man who was not interested in the trappings of academic life. He preferred to work alone, often in long, uninterrupted stretches. He was known for his absent-mindedness and his lack of social graces. He was a man who was deeply uncomfortable with the conventions of polite society. He was a man who was often misunderstood, a man who was seen as strange and aloof. His personal life was also complicated. He was a gay man, living in a time when homosexuality was illegal and could lead to imprisonment. He was forced to hide his true self, to live a life of secrecy and fear. It was a burden that would ultimately destroy him. The outbreak of the Second World War in 1939 would provide Turing with a new and urgent purpose. He was recruited to work at Bletchley Park, a top-secret facility in the English countryside, where a team of brilliant mathematicians and cryptoanalysts was working to break the German military codes. The Germans were using an encryption machine known as the Enigma, a device that was considered unbreakable. The Enigma machine produced a staggering number of possible combinations, making it impossible for humans to crack the codes by hand. The task was daunting, and the stakes were enormous. The ability to read German communications could provide the Allies with a decisive advantage in the war. Turing was put in charge of Hut 8, the section responsible for cracking the German naval Enigma code, which was considered the most difficult and crucial. He and his team were under immense pressure to deliver results. The breakthrough came in 1941 when Turing and his colleagues developed a machine called the bomb, an electromechanical device that could rapidly test thousands of possible Enigma settings. The bomb was a triumph of engineering and mathematical logic, a machine that could do in minutes what would take a team of human code breakers weeks or even months to accomplish. It was the most powerful tool in the Allied arsenal. By the end of the war, the bomb had played a crucial role in deciphering German naval communications, helping to protect Allied shipping from U-boat attacks and providing vital intelligence for major operations, including the D-Day landings in Normandy. Winston Churchill himself is reported to have said that Turing made the single biggest contribution to the Allied victory. It was a staggering achievement, a contribution that likely shortened the war by 2 to 4 years and saved millions of lives. But the work was top secret, and Turing's contributions would remain classified for decades.
After the war, Turing returned to his academic work, and he began to explore a new frontier: artificial intelligence. He was fascinated by the question of whether machines could think. In 1950, he published a paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, in which he proposed the Turing test, a method for determining whether a machine could demonstrate intelligent behavior equivalent to that of a human. The test, which is still used today as a benchmark in the field of artificial intelligence, involves a human interrogator who must determine which of two respondents, one human and one machine, is the human. If the machine can fool the interrogator a significant proportion of the time, then it can be said to be thinking. The paper was a seminal work, a visionary document that set the agenda for decades of research in AI. He was a man who was imagining a world that would not exist for another 50 years. But the triumph of his intellectual life was soon overshadowed by a personal tragedy. In 1952, his home was broken into, and he reported the incident to the police. During the investigation, he revealed that he had been in a relationship with a man named Arnold Murray, a consensual relationship that was a crime under British law. He was charged with gross indecency, a charge that carried a heavy social stigma and a legal penalty. He was given a choice: imprisonment or chemical castration. He chose the latter. He was subjected to a year of hormone therapy, which involved injections of estrogen that caused him to develop breasts and experience other physical and psychological side effects. It was a brutal and degrading punishment. His security clearance was revoked, and he was barred from continuing his work for the British government. His career, his reputation, and his self-esteem were shattered. He was a man who had saved his country, and he had been repaid with humiliation and persecution. Turing's life after his conviction was a tragic downward spiral. He became increasingly depressed and withdrawn. He had always been a solitary figure, but now his isolation was complete. He was a man who had lost his career, his reputation, and his sense of purpose. He continued to work on his theories, but he was a shadow of his former self. On June 7, 1954, at the age of 41, he was found dead in his home. He had died of cyanide poisoning, and the coroner ruled his death a suicide. A half-eaten apple was found on his bedside table, leading to speculation that he had laced it with cyanide and ingested it as a final theatrical act. He was a man who had been destroyed by the very society he had helped to save. His death was a tragedy of Shakespearean proportions, a story of a brilliant mind brought low by prejudice and intolerance.
For decades, Turing's role at Bletchley Park remained a secret. The world knew him only as a brilliant but eccentric mathematician who had died young. It was not until the 1970s, when the story of the Enigma code-breaking operation was finally declassified, that the full extent of his contribution became known. He was posthumously recognized as a war hero, a man who had made an immeasurable contribution to the Allied victory. His story began to resonate with a new generation, a generation that was fighting for gay rights and against the injustice of a society that persecuted people for their sexuality. He became a symbol, a martyr, a man whose life and death highlighted the terrible consequences of intolerance. The legacy of Alan Turing is one of the most profound and enduring in modern history. He is considered the father of computer science and artificial intelligence. His work on the Turing Machine laid the theoretical foundation for the digital revolution. His contributions to code-breaking saved millions of lives. He has been honored with statues, films, and a postage stamp. In 2009, the British government issued a formal apology for his treatment, and in 2013, he was posthumously pardoned by Queen Elizabeth II. The Turing Law was introduced in 2017, which posthumously pardoned thousands of other gay men who had been convicted of similar offenses. He was a man who had been vilified and humiliated, but he is now celebrated as a hero, a symbol of the fight for equality and the triumph of reason over prejudice. But there is a darker side to his legacy. His story is a reminder of the terrible price that society often demands of those who are different. It is a story of a brilliant mind that was extinguished by the very society it had helped to save. It is a cautionary tale about the dangers of intolerance, a reminder that the fight for equality is a continuous struggle. He was a man who was not just a genius, he was a human being who was denied the basic right to be himself. His story is a powerful argument for the need to create a world that is more accepting, more tolerant, and more just.
Why should someone born today still care about Alan Turing? Because his life is a testament to the power of the human mind and the importance of fighting for what is right. He was a man who overcame the limitations of his time, a man who saw a future that no one else could see. He was a man who was willing to sacrifice everything for his country, only to be betrayed by it. He was a man who was not afraid to be different, a man who was not afraid to think differently. He was a man who showed us that the greatest minds are often the most fragile, and that the world is often slow to recognize its greatest heroes. He is a reminder that we must never forget the contributions of those who have been marginalized, and that we must always strive to create a world that is more just and more inclusive. He was a man who changed the world, and his story will continue to inspire generations to come. Turing once said, "We can only see a short distance ahead, but we can see plenty there that needs to be done." He was a man who was always looking forward, a man who was always imagining a better world. He was a man who was not afraid to take risks, a man who was not afraid to challenge the status quo. He was a man who believed in the power of reason, a man who believed in the power of the human mind. He was a man who gave us the tools to build a new world, a world of computers and artificial intelligence. But he also gave us a powerful lesson about the importance of tolerance, compassion, and justice. He was a man who was both a genius and a martyr, a man who was both a hero and a symbol. His story is a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge is a noble endeavor, but it must always be guided by a deep and abiding sense of humanity. He was a man who lived in the shadows, but his light will never be extinguished. He was a man who was not afraid to be different, and in his difference he found greatness. He was a man who changed the world, and the world is only now beginning to understand the full extent of his contributions. He was a man who was far ahead of his time, a man whose legacy will continue to grow and inspire for generations to come. He was a man who showed us that the most important thing is not to fit in, but to be true to ourselves, to pursue our passions, and to never give up, no matter how dark the world may seem. He was a man who was both a genius and a martyr, and his story is one of the most powerful and moving in the history of science.